Hello, my name is Jamie Packer, and these are my two proposed fish species for the Gulf of Maine Aquarium. My first proposed fish species is a lake sturgeon. On the left, we have the taxonomy of the species, and on the right, we have a picture of the lake sturgeon, as well as two of close relatives to it, the green sturgeon and the white sturgeon. Some characteristics of this species is that they have a torpedo-shaped body. They have their body is lined with 5 rows of scutes, which are little bony plates. They have a cone-shaped snout. They have 4 barbels near their mouth, and their tail is asymmetrically heterococcal caudal tail. They grow up to 2 meters long and approximately 200 pounds. They actually do not have scales. It is a coarse, like leather texture skin. The top of their body is a sandy brown coloration, while their underbelly is a pale white. We also have a photo of the juveniles, which are speckled black. Their habitat includes cold, fresh water, mostly large lakes and rivers because of how large they grow. They need large bodies of water. They typically use the rivers for reproduction purposes. They also prefer areas with little vegetation. Although they aren't too picky, they will use whatever is available. My second proposed fish species is the dwarf sawfish. On the left is the taxonomy of this species, and again on the right I have a photo of the dwarf sawfish as well as two close relatives, the small-toothed sawfish and the green sawfish. Some characteristics of this species is that they are 10 feet in length, although this is the smallest sawfish species. They're still that long. Their body is covered in dermal denticle scales. They are a dark olive brown coloration, again with the white underbelly. Their gill slits, as well as their mouth, are on the underside of their body. They have triangular shaped pectoral fins. Their first dorsal fin is located nearly directly above their pelvic fins. They also have a torpedo-shaped body, although they do not have any barbels, like the lake sturgeon. Their caudal fin has a very small lower lobe, again the heterococcal caudal fin. They also have a predominant feature of a long-shaped snout, and on that it's called a rostrum. On their rostrum, they have 20 to 22 teeth for females, while males have less, about 20 to 23. Their habitat is pretty small. It's only the north and northwest coastlines of Australia. They are a marine ocean species. They prefer to lay on muddy bottom seafloors. Although when juvenile, they use a brackish estuary for protection. And they prefer shallow, near-shore habitats near these river openings. Comparing the two fish species' life histories, reproductive strategies, the lake sturgeon spawns in rivers, while the dwarf sawfish is actually ovoviviparous, meaning that the mother hatches like the eggs inside of her, and then gives birth to live young. The lake sturgeon reproduce in the spring and early summer. When they do this, they migrate upstream to lay up to 700,000 eggs, which will be fertilized by the males nearby. However, the dwarf sawfish, the spawning is unknown. Offspring numbers, about 50,000 eggs survive, and they only reproduce about every 4 years. And again, for the dwarf sawfish, it's unknown. When do they sexually mature? For the lake sturgeon, it's about 20 to 25 years of age, and males about 15 to 20, so it's pretty long. And the dwarf sawfish is 7 years. Lake sturgeon, the lifespan, some females can live up to being 150 years old, while males roughly average about 55. The dwarf sawfish is less, with 35 years. Lake sturgeon can grow up to 2 meters long and 200 pounds, while the dwarf sawfish grows up to 10 feet long. Some conservation for the lake sturgeon. They are considered a threatened species. Soon to be, it is estimated that in 2024 they'll be included in the endangered species. They currently have very strict fishing laws and regulations for them, and these seasons that they are able to be fished can range by how many are caught versus what time of year they are caught. Just depends on location. Each state has a Department of Natural Resources responsible for these laws and regulations. As well as in Canada, they have a Natural Resources Canada department. Concerns include overfishing. They are very popular in the caviar business. They have a loss of habitat, decrease in water quality, everyday pollution, specifically PCBs. They are susceptible to parasites and invasive species. Conservation for the dwarf sawfish, they are on the endangered species list. They're in Australian waters. They have a full species protection order, as well as the country educates its fishermen on safe release practices, so they survive if they're caught accidentally. The Australian Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment, and Water is who is responsible for the laws and regulations. Concerns include loss of habitat, entanglement on fishing gear. Pictured above is their toothed rostrum, which gets very entangled easily. They are susceptible to bycatch, pollution, as well as invasive species. There's currently no sawfish species on the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch. One way that you can tell if a sturgeon is healthy or not, you can compare their length and weight for their age, make sure they're growing appropriately. You can look at signs of malnourishment. You can look for lesions, which is pictured. The red circle is most likely a lamprey bite, which is a parasite that affects these sturgeons. Yes, in the picture. You can look for fin rot diseases as well as other parasites. Some health diseases that affect lake sturgeon include Assapensa herpes virus 1, the common grub, lamprey, schistosoma, monogenea, Spinatectus assapenseri, and generally lake sturgeon are considered to be less susceptible to diseases due to them being anadromous, which is their migratory status from lakes into rivers and back and forth. Looking closer at one disease that affects the sturgeon is the accipenserid herpes virus 1. This virus is especially dangerous for juveniles, which they consider to be less than 1 year old, and it may even result in mortality. Their body may be covered in blister-like sores, red patches, and ulcers. Adults may have more of a white plaque-like raised patches, and it is maybe less of an irritant for these adults. In conclusion, the lake sturgeon, they are the largest and oldest native fish species in the Great Lakes, and they are actually considered living dinosaurs. And on the right, you can actually see a fossil of a sturgeon, which is approximately 300 million years old. For the dwarf sawfish, they are an endangered species, so it's important to help help them repopulate, which is it's typically better to do in a aquarium or aquaculture environment where they can be properly taken care of. And as a predatory fish, the dwarf sawfish is important in keeping habitats healthy. The lake sturgeon would be the easiest species to harvest because between the two species I listed, there are currently fish hatcheries that exclusively raise lake sturgeon for repopulation and conservation purposes. So the aquarium could be able to probably get some specimens from a situation like that. Lake sturgeon were heavily fished out in the 1800s and early 1900s. Their population numbers plummeted greatly due to this. And since then, there have been many laws and regulations that are strongly enforced. Previously, there were an estimated 15 million lake sturgeon in the Great Lakes alone before commercial fisheries decimated the population numbers. Today, there's less than 1% of those numbers currently. Through conservation, sturgeon are now increasing their numbers and are being seen in locations where they have not been for generations. In one particular conservation effort, the state of Michigan in 2012 released a habitat restoration plan with a focus on lake sturgeon. In 2017, 5 years later, juvenile sturgeon started to be released in these waterways because they were considered healthy again. And then 2 years later, in 2019, fishermen started to report catching them. In some areas, a sturgeon had not even been caught or seen for over 100 years. This conservation effort seems to be very great and is helping the repopulation of these sturgeons. And on the bottom right, I've included a sign from the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources or Fish and Wildlife, basically telling what to do if fishermen catch a sturgeon. And here's my works cited. Thank you for listening.